Da-da-da-dang-dang-dang-dang-dang. China. Hello, or should I say, ni hao, my mashi mates. Today we'll be covering why the Japanese invaded Manchuria, what happened and the events leading up to the Second United Front. Bruce Lee kick, wah! Da-da-da-dang-dang-dang-dang-dang. China. The invasion of Manchuria, the Xian incident, and the Second United Front. Bruce Lee kick number 2. Let's start with the land of the rising sun. What do we know about Japan? Well, sushi comes from Japan, which I love, and they like killing whales. Japan is also the home of Super Mario, anime, karate, and overly polite people who pick up their trash after football games. So it may come as a surprise to you that at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, Japan was actually a warmongering nation looking to expand her empire. What? Why were they such a hostile bunch? Well, at the beginning of the 20th century, Japan's population, industry, military and navy was growing fast. Now, Japan is just a small island, much like the UK, and we all know what the British did to expand her empire. That's what Japan decided to do. Japan decided to grab land overseas to create an empire. In 1895, Japan fought a war against China and won, gaining Formosa, now known as Taiwan, and the Pescados Islands. Korea was also allowed independence. In 1904 to 1905, Japan defeated Russia for control of Manchuria and Korea. In 1910, Korea was then made a Japanese colony. Japan sided with the Allies during World War I and at the end gained the Chinese port of Kiaochao from the Germans. Also in 1915, the Japanese presented the Chinese with their 21 demands, which the Chinese leader at the time, Yuan Shikai, agreed to. So, as we can see, the Japanese were eager to create and expand their empire, and in 1931 they decided to invade Manchuria, located in northern China. But why Manchuria? Well, Manchuria was 3 times the size of the Japanese empire, excluding Formosa and Korea. It had a wealth of natural resources which the Japanese looked to exploit through the South Manchurian Railway Company, and the Japanese had invested vast sums of money in Manchuria, about 440 million yen, to build the railways, shipping, mining, steel manufacture, agriculture, and cattle. By 1927, Japan had a stranglehold on Manchuria's economy through its control of important mines, railways, factories and ports. To protect their investment, the Japanese had a large army situated in Kwantung, southern Manchuria, and the Japanese government had made a friendly agreement with Zhang Zuolin, the warlord of Manchuria. The Japanese were happy for Zhang, a warlord, to rule Manchuria because it weakened the central government in Beijing, and a weak Chinese government suited the Japanese interest. You see, the Japanese are smart people. You don't think of wasabi flavoured ice cream unless you're a clever one. Then, in 1928, Chiang Kai-shek embarked on the Northern Expedition, and once he reached Beijing, he formed a new government. Zhang Zuolin recognized Jiang's authority, and this prompted the Japanese to take action out of fear that the two combined forces of Jiang and Chang would threaten Japan's dominance of Manchuria. The Japanese took action by assassinating Zhang Zuolin, blowing up his train. His son, the high-living, gambling and drug addict Zhang Zhuliang, took over, and the Japanese thought they could easily control him. But like the rest of the world, Japan's economy was about to be flushed down the Great Depression hit in 1929, shattering Japan's trade, and by 1931, half their factories were closed. Japan's government was incapable of finding a solution to their economic woes, but the young Japanese officers in Kwantung did. They believed foreign conquest was a way out of the depression. Their reasoning was that new colonies would open up new markets for trade, allow access to raw materials from the land they took, and more jobs would be created. With such expert economic thinking, these officers obviously graduated from Harvard Business School. With an army already in Manchuria, that's where the Japanese decided to start. In September 1931, the Japanese army located in Kwantung started to take over Manchuria, starting with the town of Xian. But they needed an excuse. They said that Chinese soldiers tried to blow up the Japanese-owned South Manchurian Railway located north of Shenyang. As you can see, railway blown up by the Chinese. Need more proof? Here's a reconstruction of what happened according to some very reliable sources in the Japanese army. After Shenyang, 50,000 Japanese soldiers went on to occupy the rest of Manchuria. Zhang Shuliang wanted to fight the Japanese, but realizing the Japanese were too strong, Chiang Kai-shek refused. Instead, Chiang relied on the League of Nations. In February 1932, the Japanese renamed Manchuria Manchuria and brought the ex-emperor Puyi back to rule as a figurehead. Of course, the real rulers of Manchuria were the Japanese. As you can see, the Japanese had now occupied a considerable amount of land. But like all people consumed by greed and lust and any of that other good stuff, the Japanese wanted more. Between 1933 to 1936, the Kwantung Army first took the province of Rihe and then marched south, occupying the provinces of Chaha and Siuyun and parts of Hebei and Shaanxi, the province the communists were based after the long march. By the end of 1936, the Japanese were demanding the separation of northern China from the south. Cheeky buggers. So now we know why and how the Japanese invaded Manchuria and other parts of northern China, but what was the reaction of the Chinese people and those in power? Well, the anti-foreign feeling the Chinese people had was now directed against the Japanese. In Shanghai, the Chinese organized a boycott of all things Japan, such as toys and merchandise. Chinese passengers were even blocked from boarding Japanese ships by other Chinese. If they dared board, they would be thrown overboard. How did the KMT and the communists react? Well, the people wanted Jiang and the KMT to declare war on Japan, but Jiang refused. He wanted national unity first, and those pesky communists he had been trying to exterminate would not go away. On the other hand, the communists were well up for fighting the Japanese, and were ideally placed because they were in areas most threatened by Japan. The communist slogan was "Chinese should not fight Chinese." With the communists extending such a heartwarming olive branch, Chiang Kai-shek must have been moved. No, he wasn't. Instead, the cold-hearted dumpling launched his millionth extermination campaign against the communists in 1936. His plan was to attack the communists at Yan'an, and the man to lead the extermination was none other than the ex-warlord of Manchuria, Zhang Shuliang. But neither he nor his army, who were mostly made up of Manchurians, wanted to fight the communists. They wanted to fight the Japanese, especially Zhang Shuliang. He wanted revenge for his father. So what did the communists and Zhang Shuliang do? They made an unofficial agreement. They would not fight each other. Instead, they focused on the Japanese. Good idea. Jiang got wind of the deal and went to Xian to persuade Zhang Shuliang to carry on with the extermination. But when Jiang arrived in Xian, he was arrested and held prisoner. Zhang Shuliang wanted to convince Jiang that the real enemy was Japan, not the Red Army. For 2 weeks, Jiang was held captive while the communists, KMT and the Russian government held discussions. They eventually reached an agreement. The Second United Front. In December 1936, in exchange for Jiang being released, the Nationalists and Communists formed a Second United Front to fight against their common enemy, Japan. In July 1937, deciding to strike before China became too strong, the Japanese began another invasion of Chinese territory. This time, they wanted to conquer the whole of China. Da dong da. To be continued. If I have time to make a video.